The sky above Orion's edge wasn't. Supposed to burn, it wasn't supposed to. Flicker and twist like torn fabric in the wind, and yet that's exactly what it did as human cruisers and Valak Dominion warships shredded each other above the cratered surface of Vorar 6, what used to be a mining colony was now a graveyard of smoldering steel plasma ash and bodies neither side would bother to collect. Cashin ducked beneath a fractured support beam, his pulse cannon heavy in his arms, his helmet HUD blinking warnings like a nagging grandmother. Oxygen levels low, enemy forces detected, morale non-existent. Wonderful, he muttered, sliding into the shadows. All that training, all those years, and here I am crawling through rubble while aliens try to turn me into human. Confetti the CS in his ear crackled. Cashin, you've gone off the grid again. That was Sergeant Darnell's voice, dry as a Martian drought. If you die out there, I'm not filling out the paperwork. Cashin clicked his Z twice. No time for a witty reply. He had wandered deeper into Sector 9 than he should have, chasing a Valak scout squad that had scattered like roaches after the latest orbital bombardment. He expected to find corpses or stragglers. Instead, he found her. She stepped through the smoke like a nightmare carved from obsidian, 7 feet tall, in her armor sleek and sharp, humming with alien tech. Her helmet visor glowed faintly blue, and in her left hand she carried a plasma scythe that whispered through the air like a song of death. Cashin's brain, brave soldier that it was, immediately offered him 3 possible reactions. 1, shoot first and hope to wake up in a medbay. 2, run like hell. 3, make a joke. Naturally, he chose the worst one. Hey, he called out, wrying his pulse rifle. You're taller than the last Vic I shot. Must be all the space protein for a heartbeat. She didn't move. Then her helmet folded back with an elegant hiss, revealing her face, pale violet skin, angular features, and eyes like twin nebulae swirling in an endless void. She was Vera, the Valak Dominion's finest warrior, the one the human high command had dubbed the Reaper of the Rift. Cashin felt his stomach drop into his boots. Ver tilted her head, the beast curve of a smile touching her lips. You talk too much for someone moments away from dismemberment. Well, Cashin shrugged, keeping his rifle trained on her. If you're going to die, you might as well die being annoying. They circled each other, weapons raised as the remains of the colony burned around them. Somewhere in orbit, human and Balak ships were still tearing each other apart, but here it felt like the war had shrunk too. Just the 2 of them. Vera lunged first. Fast, too fast. Cashin barely dodged her plasma scythe, grazing the air where his throat had been. He fired bolts of blue energy slicing past her shoulder as she twisted, effortlessly moving like gravity itself bent around her. Every motion she made was poetry sharpened to a knife's edge. But Cashin had spent years fighting soldiers who were bigger, faster, stronger. He knew the rhythm of survival. Stumble, adapt, and above all, keep them talking. You always this friendly on first dates, he grunted, ducking beneath her second swing. Her smile widened sharp as the stars. You humans so desperate to speak even when you're bleeding. He rolled behind the wreckage of a transport shuttle, breathing hard, pulse cannon hot in his hands. What can I say? It's a coping mechanism. Vera vaulted the shuttle like she weighed nothing, landing inches from him. Her scythe hummed dangerously close to his throat. Then she paused. Her expression flickered, not confusion, not hesitation, but something far stranger. Recognition. Cashin's sweat sticking to his brow, noticed it immediately. What he rasped. You waiting for me to say something clever? Vera's voice dropped, quieter than the chaos around them. I've seen you before, she murmured. Not here. Not now. His brow furrowed. You mean like surveillance footage, propaganda posters? Wanted one handsome idiot. She shook her head slowly, her gaze distant as if staring at something behind him behind. This moment, no, she said in visions. Dreams, you and I, standing together in A. Future that hasn't happened yet for A. Second, neither of them moved a plasma. Mortar detonated somewhere to their left, sending dust and flames spiraling through. The air cast and coughed, glancing over. His shoulder, like any second now someone would jump out and yell, "Gotcha, what kind of future?" he asked, voice light but eyes sharp. V met his gaze, and for the first time there was no war in her face, only something fragile like the edge of a glass cracking under pressure of future. Where you and I, she whispered, choose something neither of our species will forgive. Cashin blinked then, because the universe was absurd and he had a death wish. He replied, well, at least tell me I get to keep my good looks. Vera let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh, stepping back before he could ask anything else. Her calm crackled in her ear, a harsh alien voice barking her name. Duty yanked her away. She tapped her helmet, the visor sliding back down like a mask. This isn't the last time we'll meet, human, she said, voice cool again. Cashin raised his rifle, though not very convincingly. It's Cashin, by the way, but sure, human works too. Vera disappeared into the smoke without another word, and Cashin, still kneeling in the rubble, shook his head and muttered to himself, well, that's going to be hard to explain. To command the problem with surviving a fight against the galaxy's deadliest alien warrior wasn't the physical scars. Cashin had walked away without a scratch technically, but it was the mental part, the nagging itch behind his eyes that followed him like a ghost through every debriefing, every half slept night. You're distracted, Sergeant, Darnell said, slamming a data pad onto the metal table of the command tent. Cashin rubbed his face with one gloved hand. I'm focused, hyper-focused, actually. Laser beam focused. You've read the same line on that briefing report 6 times, Darnell pointed out, and you haven't insulted me once today. That's how I know something wrong. Cashin opened his mouth, ready to deliver something cutting about Darnell's haircut, but the words dried up. What was he supposed to say? That the alien warrior they'd spent 3 years fighting had whispered cosmic sweet nothings to him in the middle of a battlefield, that her violet eyes haunted him more than the screams of the dying, yeah, that'd go over well instead. Cashin stood, snatched his pulse rifle from the rack, and muttered, I'm going for a walk. Outside, the sky still burned faintly orange from the fallout clouds. Vorar 6 had been reduced to rubble and ash, but humans were excellent at setting up new temporary camps amid old disasters. Drones zipped overhead, scanning for Vic stragglers on the horizon. The glow of human battleships flickered like distant stars. Cashin walked beyond the perimeter, past the patrolling mechs and razor wire fences. His HUD pinged him a warning, you are leaving safe zone, but he ignored it. The truth was, he wasn't looking for safety. He was looking for her halfway up the ridge. His cowl crackled again. Cashin, what the hell are you doing? Darnell's voice, just stretching my legs, Cashin replied, climbing over a broken drone chassis. You're in a war zone, not a hiking trail. Tell that to my step counter. I'm about to hit 10,000. He muted the sea before Darnell could respond, and kept walking. The ridge sloped down toward the remains of an old mining platform. The scaffolding twisted into something almost skeletal. Cashin crouched beside a rusted beam and scanned the area. Nothing, no Valak patrols, no shimmering blue armor, no sign of her. He sighed and was about to turn back when something flickered across his HUD, a faint energy signature, too precise to be random. Cashin narrowed his eyes. Well, hello there. He followed the signal down a narrow canyon, keeping his rifle low. At the end of the path, he found it a small Vic transmitter node disguised beneath rocks and debris. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Without thinking, Cashin knelt beside it and tapped into the interface, letting his HUD decrypt the signal. The message that scrolled across his visor wasn't coordinates or orders, it was a name, Vera. And beneath it, in the Valak script, transit automatically, the anomaly has spoken again, the human is the key. Cashin exhaled sharply. Well, wasn't that just perfect? A rustle of movement behind him made him spin, weapon raised, but it wasn't an enemy squad, it was a single Valak scout, helmet cracked, limping toward him with a plasma blade drawn. Cashin fired before the alien could react, dropping him to the dust, and then something bizarre happened. The scout, bleeding out, laughed. You don't even know human, he rasped, voice garbled through his helmet's failing speakers. You're already in the story. What story? Cashin crouched beside him, the Valak breathing slowed. The one the stars wrote long before you were born, and with that, he died. Cashin sat there for a long moment, listening to the static WHNE of the empty transmitter, the sound of distant plasma artillery, and the thirring realization that the universe was playing a game he didn't understand. Later, back at camp, Darnell was waiting. You went rogue again, the sergeant growled. Cashin dropped the transmitter. Note on the table between them found something. Darnell frowned, scanning the device. Valak tech looks like a glorified message drone. It's more than that, Cashin said. They're looking for me. Darnell arched an eyebrow. You're not that special. Cashin leaned back, voice dry. Tell that to the alien woman who keeps showing up in my dreams. There was a long pause. Darnell sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Cashin, I swear to every star in the sky, if you're developing some kind of battlefield crush, it's not like that, Cashin said quickly, then hesitated. Well, maybe a little like that, but there's something else. He tapped the node. They called me the key. Darnell rubbed his face. I hate when you're involved, D, in prophecy. You're the worst person for IT. Cashin grinned, finally able to summon one of his trademark smirks. Well, I aim to disappoint. Outside, the sky rumbled as human and Vic ships exchanged another volley. Somewhere out there beyond the smoke and plasma, Vera was waiting, and the stars apparently had a plan. There were odd reasons why Cashin shouldn't have been inside the data vault of a classified human battle cruiser. For starters, he wasn't supposed to be there. Secondly, he technically broken 4 military regulations just by stepping into the server wing. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, if anyone caught him, the punishment would involve a lot less talking and a lot more court-martial. But curiosity had always been a bigger problem for Cashin than death. The humming of the quantum servers vibrated through the floor beneath his boots. Blue light pulsed in steady waves from the stacked data cores, each one housing terabytes of information scraped from Valak Dominion broadcasts, encrypted transmissions, battlefield scans, every scrap of knowledge humanity had hoarded about their enemy. Cashin slipped a stolen access chip into the terminal and keyed in the search phrase Valak anomaly prophecy human key. The results poured across the screen faster than he expected. Hundreds of files, hundreds of flagged reports, and one at the top classified Omega level clearance only. Cashin smiled. Bingo, he tapped the file, overriding the security protocols. Because, well, he had a habit of making friends with hackers in low places. The screen blinked and displayed a brief, chilling dossier. Project Anomaly Echo Origin VC Dominion Prior Archives Contents Predictive Simulations of Inner Species Future Events dated 3,000 years prior to current war. Cashin scrolled down, eyes narrowing. Subjects Valak warrior Commander Vera, human individual designation unknown, outcome timeline convergence probability of forced peace or mutual destruction 99.7%. At the bottom of the file was a still image, grainy, distorted, but Unmistakably, her Vera standing beside A. Human silhouette, his silhouette Cashin. Exhaled sharply, well, that's unsettling. Behind him, the door hit open. You're the worst secret agent I've ever seen, Darnell said dryly, stepping inside. He folded his arms, unimpressed. You want to explain why you're snooping around in restricted files like a teenager looking for forbidden homework? Cashin rubbed the back of his neck. Would you believe me if I said I'm trying to save the galaxy? Darnell walked over and stared at the screen, reading the file. His expression hardened. You're not joking? Nope, the sergeant shook his head. The Alec Dominion has prophecies now. That's the worst sci-fi trope I've ever heard. Cashin gave him a look. You're literally standing on a ship orbiting a dying planet while fighting an alien empire. You think we're above tropes before Darnell could reply. The comm crackled. Enemy squad detected South Ridge. Multiple Valak signatures. Darnell groaned. Perfect timing, let's go play hero. The South Ridge was dust and debris under a sky crackling with orbital fire. By the time Cashin and his squad arrived, Valak soldiers were already entrenched behind makeshift barricades. Plasma rifles leveled. Cashin ducked behind a half-melted vehicle hull. Pulse cannon pressed against his shoulder. Darnell barked orders over the comm, but Cashin's eyes weren't on the soldiers. They were on the figure standing at the back of the Valak line, tall, unmistakable, her armor catching the flicker of distant flames. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't giving orders. She was staring directly at him. The battle roared around them, but Cashin barely heard it. He made a decision he knew Darnell would call monumentally stupid. He broke cover. The valet guns tracked him immediately, but Vera raised her hand, and the soldiers hesitated. Cashin walked slowly across the no man's land, his hands raised, helmet clipped to his belt, the dust and smoke swirling around his boots like ghosts. When he stopped 10 feet from her, the world seemed to fall away. You again, he said. Vera's visor retracted, revealing her face, calm, unreadable, her eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. You shouldn't be here, she said. Story of my life. Behind him, Darnell's voice shouted frantically in his earpiece. Cashin, what the hell are you doing? He muted the comm. Vera took a slow step forward. You found the files, didn't you? Cashin swallowed. The ones where I'm the human key to peace or doom? Yeah, real confidence booster. She studied him for a long moment, and then against every expectation she smiled. It wasn't the sharp, dangerous smile she wore in battle. It was something quieter, sadder. The anomaly isn't a weapon, she said softly. It's a map of all the futures we could have had. Cashin frowned. So which future is this? Her eyes met his. The one were we to choose before he could answer. The calm in his ear crackled violently. Multiple Vic reinforcements inbound. Heavy units. Get out of there now. Vera's expression darkened. Go. Cashin hesitated, everything in him screaming to stay, to ask her what the hell any of this meant, but she'd already turned away, barking orders at her soldiers, the moment slipping away like sand through his fingers. He ran back toward the human line, plasma bolts tearing the air behind him. Darnell tackled him behind cover. The second he crossed back over. You absolute idiot, the sergeant snapped. You trying to get yourself killed? Cashin shook his head, breathless. Hard hammering. Not today, he said quietly, but the universe has other plans. The cruiser Cashin had stolen wasn't exactly inconspicuous. To be fair, it wasn't entirely his fault. There weren't a lot of subtle options when you were fleeing both the human council and the VC Dominion at the same time. So naturally, he had picked the loudest, sleekest, most illegally modified Valak scout cruiser he could find and bolted straight into the black. The ship's AI, a snarky Valak interface he'd nicknamed Sparks, crackled through the cockpit speakers as Cashin adjusted the Course toward the Orion Rift Humanive. Analyzed your piloting patterns. Statistically, there is an 87% chance you will crash into an asteroid before. Sunrise Casson smirked, kicking his boots. Up on the console, that's only if they asteroid has a personal vendetta spark. Sighed a distinctly alien sound like static trying to imitate disappointment. Your species thrives on chaos. You're catching on beside him in the co-pilot chair sat the reason they were running. Vera, arms folded, expression unreadable. Beneath her helmet she hadn't said much since they'd escaped the South Ridge. Under heavy fire. And Cashin wasn't sure if she was still debating whether to stab him or thank him, probably both, so Cashin said, finally glancing sideways at her. Any chance you're going to explain why we're risking mutual treason for a bedtime story about a timeline anomaly? Vera didn't look at him because that bedtime story is real, and the people hunting us on both sides would rather erase the future than let us change it. The ship hummed beneath them, slicing through the void at impossible speeds outside. The stars bled across the viewport like brush strokes distorted by the cruiser's slipstream drive. Cashin tapped the console, pulling up a hollow map of the sector. The anomaly site, he said, pointing at a blinking red marker buried deep. The rift, that's where we're going. Vera nodded. Once it's not just a data vault. It's a quantum fracture, point a place where every possible version of the war of us overlaps. Sounds cozy. Cashin muttered, and what happens when we get there? We turn off the universe. Vera glanced at him, then something sharp in her gaze. We choose whether this war ends or everything burns. Cashin leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his teeth. Well, no pressure. Hours later, the cruiser dropped out of slipstream at the edge of the Orion Rift. The rift wasn't like other parts of the galaxy. It wasn't empty space face. It was a wound, massive black clouds of dust and shattered star fragments coiled around each other like serpents. Electrical storms danced between them, laced with unnatural green. Light sensors went blind in the rift now. Comms worked inside it. It was the place maps pretended didn't exist. Cashin stared at the chaos outside the viewport. Home sweet nightmare. Sparks chimed in. Entering the rift will reduce survival odds by approximately 92%. Hey, improvement from earlier, Cashin quipped. Tightening his harness, Vera stood, adjusting her armor. If we turn back now, they'll catch us anyway. He glanced at her. You always this optimistic? She allowed the ghost of a smile. Only on special occasions. The cruiser's engines roared as they dove into the rift. Immediately, the ship shuddered, buffeted by gravitational waves, and electromagnetic interference. Spark screamed in Cashin's ear about hull integrity and structural collapse, but he barely heard it over the storm tearing at the ship. Vera's voice cut through the chaos. Their dead zone ahead. The anomaly site is inside. Cashin fought the controls, guiding them toward a swirling pocket of calm within the madness. As they neared the scanners, miraculously came back online, showing the silhouette of something enormous drifting in the rift's heart. A station. No, not a station. A machine. It was ancient, alien, and utterly impossible. A lattice of black spires stretching for kilometers, floating effortlessly amid the storm, humming with faint blue light patterns of geometry so complex they made the eye ache to look at them, like someone had carved a cathedral out of math itself. Sparks stuttered. Unknown structure detected. Quantum readings, impossible. Cashin swallowed. That's our destination. The ship descended slowly, weaving between the towering spires until it touched down on a fractured platform jutting out from the machine surface outside. Everything was silent. Vera stood by the airlock, helmet in hand, her expression unreadable. You sure this is worth dying for? Cassin asked, voice lighter than he felt. She looked at him, eyes softer than He'd ever seen no, she said, but it might be worth living for. The airlock hissed open, and together they stepped into the anomaly. The machine's interior didn't look like anything Casson had expected. No glowing control panels, no ancient consoles or alien glyphs, just an endless corridor of light and shadow. The walls shifting gently like liquid glass, humming with something older than language. Each step echoed strangely, as if the sound didn't just bounce off the walls but rippled through time itself. Behind him, Spark's voice crackled faintly in his earpiece. My sensors indicate temporal distortion in this environment. I strongly advise you to turn around, preferably while screaming. Cashin smirked. You're doing great. Spark's real motivational Vera walked beside him. Silence, her footsteps light despite the weight of her armor. She hadn't spoken much since they landed, but he could feel the tension rolling off her like static. One part resolve, one part fear. That widened into a vast chamber, and there it was, the anomaly core, a sphere of fractal light floating above a chasm, each pulse of its surface revealing flashes of other realities, fleeting images of stars, being born worlds, dying versions of himself, and Vera fighting, laughing, dying together or not at all. Cashin stared momentarily speechless. Okay, he said, finally got to admit that's prettier than I imagined. And I imagined a lot. Vera exhaled slowly. This is it, the fracture point where all timelines intersect. From the far side of the chamber movement, Cashin's hand shot to his weapon, but Vera raised a hand to stop him. A squad of Vic soldiers emerged from the shadows, followed by a human strike team, both sides' weapons drawn, eyes wary not at each other but at the machine, at them, and leading them were two very familiar REs, Sergeant Darnell, looking like he hadn't slept in days, and a valid commander whose name Cashin didn't know, but whose scowl promised nothing good. You've caused a lot of trouble, Cashin, Darnell called across the void. Yeah, Cashin shouted back, it's my brand. The Valot commander's voice was cold steel. Deactivate the machine, walk away, or we'll do it for you. Cashin glanced at Vera. They're not big on middle ground negotiations, are they? She shook her head. They fear what they can't control. The soldiers inched forward, tension rising like a coil about to snap. Cashin stepped toward the anomaly. Everyone's afraid, he said, raising his voice. Afraid of what happens if the war ends, afraid of what happens if it doesn't. The chamber quivered slightly, as if the machine itself was listening. This thing doesn't force peace or destruction, Cashin continued. It just shows us what's possible. Darnell's voice echoed. Cashin, don't do this. Cashin smiled faintly. You ever wonder why we were the ones who kept seeing each other in all those visions? It wasn't because we're special, it's because we were the only ones who stopped fighting long enough to look. He turned to Vera, so ready to break the universe. Vera's smile was small but real. With you always. They reached out together, their hands brushing the surface of the anomaly. The moment they touched it, time folded. The chamber disappeared, and suddenly Cashin was everywhere. He saw himself fighting Vera. He saw himself dying at her hand. He saw himself shaking hands with her across a conference table. He saw them building a new colony together, laughing at some private joke. He saw worlds burning and worlds flourishing. It wasn't just futures, it was choice. He understood then the machine wasn't a weapon, it wasn't even technology. Not really. It was a mirror showing them the consequences of their own decisions, and it waited for their choice. Cashin looked at Vera across the infinite. She nodded. Once they chose. When the light faded, they were standing back in the chamber, but everything felt different. The soldiers, human and Valak alike, lowered their weapons, blinking as if they had awoken from a long sleep. The machine was gone. No explosion, no collapse, just absence, like it had never Existed Cashin turned to Darnell who approached Whaley. You good, Cassin asked. Darnell studied him, then let out a weary breath. I have no idea what just happened. But for the first time in years, the war feels over. Across the platform, the valet commander nodded stiffly at Vera, then at Cashin. Without another word, the soldiers began filing out, human and Ick alike, side by side. Weeks later, aboard a neutral station orbiting the Orion Rift, Cashin leaned against the rail of a quiet observation deck, watching the rift storms flicker faintly in the distance. Vera appeared beside him without a sound. You're hard to track down these days, she said. Cassin grinned. I'm semi-retired now. Full-time Galaxy, saver part-time Barfla. They stood in silence for a while, watching the endless dance of stars. Finally, Very spoke. You never asked what I whispered to you that first day. Cashin glanced at her, brow raised. I figured if it was important, you'd tell me. She smiled, soft and genuine. I told you I saw you in my dreams, she said quietly, but what I didn't say was that in every future I saw I wasn't alone. Cashin swallowed the lump in his throat. Well, he said, voice light, next time maybe lead with that. Save us a lot of plasma fire. Vera laughed, the sound soft but true. Above them, the rift storm settled into calm, and for the first time in a long while, so did they.